Hello everybody, welcome to this new video series for Blender which will be aimed at modifiers this time. This small series is meant to explain all the options modifiers use, and I will be mainly explaining, at least for now, the most common modifiers. This video will cover subdivision modifier only, and I think in the future it will be all separated into individual videos, each taking the time needed for that each individual modifier. However, don't worry, we are not stopping with the modeling practices. I am at the moment preparing more videos. However, this is something that I want to have here on this channel so that you can always come here and have it explained. That's the introduction for this series, and let's get to it. Subdivision modifier. What is it and what do we use it for? The subdivision modifier, if you followed previous videos or ever modeled, you probably know that what it does is that it's smoothing the models for you. You are working with less polygons or points while having it smoothed out and adding more polygons to it. Generally, you are multiplying by 4. Every time you are subdividing, you're multiplying by 4. You have this face, which when you have a face, it will basically split like this. The moment you add one subdivision, you add another, it will split again like this. And it will create 4 faces inside one face. And that's most people need and use. However, this has more options. Let's talk about them. When you use subdivision modifier by default, we are using Catmull Clark. But next to it is simple. So what's the difference between these two? The first one, the Catmull Clark, what it's doing is it's averaging the distance between the edges where it's smoothing it and doing its best to set the curvature of the next geometry. So basically it's just deforming the object. It's making it smooth. That you know. But the simple, what it does, when you use it, it seems like nothing changed. But this change, you can only see it when you apply it or when you disable the optimal display. We'll get to it. So if I apply this, you can see that what happened is I have the geometry, but my object is not deformed. It stays the same. It keeps the shape. This is good when you are trying to add a texture to it or when you are trying to cut something into it and you just need the shape to remain without the support loops, but need more detail. That's a good handy way, and I often use it. So it's actually a good feature when you need more detail. Below it, there is level viewport and render. So what the level viewport and render does is the level viewport is the subdivisions we see in a viewport. If I go to statistic here in the left corner, I can see that the number changes when I'm adding more subdivisions. And the renderer, that's what you are going to see in the output. That's what, when you press render, that's the subdivision you will get. So if you have level viewport of 5, but the render set to 2, your render will have less subdivisions. The best practice of this is that usually you want to preview what you have, then you want to go lower with the level viewport and eventually set the render higher so that the detail remains in output, but while you are working, you don't have unnecessary geometry. But also I want to point out, by default, the render has only 2 subdivisions, so make sure that if you are using more, you change that. Next thing is optimal display. What the optimal display does is that it's saving the performance to us by not showing all the polygons. So if I go to wireframe, right now we are seeing this. We are seeing the subdivision deformed, but we are only seeing the original polygons. We are only seeing the original geometry just deformed. If you turn it off, you will see all the geometry that will get generated. This is good if you want to show somebody what's happening inside the modifier or how much geometry you are having right now, generally previewing your final. But personally, I always want this on because I pretty much know how much I'm going to get, especially with the statistic. My main information is the count, not really how it looks, unless there is a geometrical problem, of course. You can also, if you turn it off and turn on cage, you will see it in edit mode. But again, you will be only able to move the original points, which I personally don't like much, as the movement is a bit different because the original movement is from here. So it's a display thing, but you are pretty much still moving from here, but it shows like it's here. Also the cage that I turned on here, it's the first icon on the modifier. It pretends as if you applied the modifier, so therefore you see it wrapped around the mesh. You can see that there is advanced. If I go to advanced, there is use limit surface. Now what the use limit surface does, if I turn it off, you can notice that it looks as if the object got bigger or basically closer to the original shape, closer to this. But what it actually does is it's a way the subdivision is calculating. It's a way when you are using the limit surface, you are pretending a shape where it's infinite subdivisions. It pretends it got, let's say, you have subdivision of 2, but it's calculating as if you are having subdivision of 10, let's say, and more. And it's trying to get you to the closest shape of the highest subdivision. So it's trying to, with this amount, it's trying to get you to this amount, let's say. If I turn it off, it's counting these distances one by one from each level to another level. This limit surface has a quality. What the quality does is, you can, if I move it down, you can see it on 1. It just changes how well quality it is, how much performance is going to take from you. You generally don't really see much difference here unless it's on 1, but there is one thing it does, and we'll get to it again. Now below it, the next thing we have is UV Smooth. The UV Smooth is a very handy thing. That's something that I think you might be using a lot, especially if you are changing things somebody else already textured. What UV Smooth does is pretty much what it says. It says how will your UVs that you are already having, we can see on the left side, will behave after your subdivisions. By default, there is keep boundaries. What it does is, as you can see, I have a square here where, let's say, would be a hole, but originally the mesh looks like this. This is the mesh that's originally there, which is square, but the subdivision will smooth it out, so essentially it will become a circle. But where it's cut it, which is here, it will stay the square. That's the boundary that we are keeping. So if we don't want that, we can also smooth all. And that will smooth everything here. So the way you want your UVs to act on the subdivision is determined here. And if you are trying to keep some UVs, let's say I have this, here it won't be so visible, but let's say I want to add one more subdivision to this, but I want the UVs to stay untouched. I could add the subdivision, and in the UV Smooth, I would say none. Or I would say keep corners, let's say. I can define the problem and just select the proper option. So that's the UV smoothing. It's just telling it how the UV should act. I often need it to keep the corners. Next is boundary smooth. Boundary smooth is, again, very handy thing. I use it all the time. And that's if you want to smooth everything or if you want to keep the corners, which is cool because I can keep this squarish, but I can make a curvature here. And that the curvature is something that I often need, but the corners I need to keep. And that's pretty much it about this one. The only thing I need you to look out for is that in this case, many people are creating holes like they will extrude and do the circles by just deleting the polygon, which is gonna make the circle, but if the outside circle often stays like this, if you boundary smooth all, it will smooth out. But if you keep the corners and you are using this on already prepared mesh, this is something that could happen to you, and maybe you would notice, maybe you wouldn't, depends on how complex your model is, but that's really just something to look out for. Use creases. Now use creases is something I don't really take away. If I go to edit mode, if you don't know what creases are, press N, you have edge data. And here I can crease an edge. If I select this tree, mean crease, it will act like this. It will make it sharp. So what crease is telling the subdivision is, hey, you don't want to smooth it here. Leave the geometry where it is. If I'm going to apply this, it will keep the original geometry there. It will keep it untouched. So you are not smoothing anything. If I turn this option off, it just turns the creases off. So if somebody gave you creased object and you want to see how it looks without it, that's how you can check. Or you can decide you don't want to use it at all. Now creasing is often used in addition with super gloops, and it can work in a way that if you have super gloops but you don't like some edges and you want them to be more sharper, you can use the creases in your advantage. Basically, this would look without the creasing. Now I can come in and have it more creased. This way, I don't have to adjust the geometry around. I don't have to push anything. I can just select the edge I want sharper and crease it. Now, before I mentioned about the quality that it affects also something else, and that's the creasing. If I'm creasing this edge and it's quality on 1, so if I go down, it immediately goes to the starting position or almost there. You can see that it goes there and then it jumps. So if I push the quality to 3, this distance before it jumps to the corner is different. If I put the quality up to maximum, you can see it's almost before the end, before it does the jump. So it's more accurate. It allows me to move the crease way more. So this is the quality and what it does. Creasing is very handy. I personally don't use it much, but feel free to explore and you can tell me what's your experience with it. The last thing that we have in here is use custom normals. Now, use custom normals is a bit difficult thing to explain, but to simplify it in a way, if you are using shade smooth, that's basically changing the normals of your mesh. It's trying to make a ball out of all the shapes that you are doing, and the more geometry you are having, the less it looks like ball, but it's just smoothing things out. The normals look like this, the way the normals are pointing, and it changes on the way you are changing your shading. And what the subdivision use custom normals is just telling you is that if you have something baked in, that usually happens that if you are exporting this to another program, the normals get baked in, and they have to remove them to get rid of this smoothing look. And this just tells you, hey, do you wanna preserve this? You will understand this a bit more on the next modifier, which we'll cover in the next video, and that will be bevel. I'll see you there.